Hello and welcome to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we're breaking down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and their 2020 Fantasy Football Team Preview. We've already touched on the NFC North, AFC South, and the Carolina Panthers. So we continue with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Here we go. All starts under center with the man, TB12, the GOAT, Tom Brady, Gisele's husband, whatever you want to call him. He is now in Tampa Bay. First time the dude's been out of New England. It's weird, and I don't know. I think the expectations are too high, everyone, for this entire team, more or less. There's good players everywhere. Defense is incredibly underrated, and I get it. There's talent. It's a great upgrade for Brady. The dude is not washed, and, looking at what he did last year, it wasn't pretty. I mean, this was statistically, by most metrics you want to look at, his worst year since at least 2013, more likely 2006. Now, in both those occasions, and even 2019, the Patriots just had a lack of, resources and weapons for Brady to get the ball to. Their fully healthy unit last year wasn't that bad, but down the stretch of last season, each of Edelman and Sanu were all sorts of banged up. N'Keal Harry never really seemed right once he came off the IR. I mean, it wasn't all on Brady last year, the fact that the Patriots couldn't consistently put up points. I mean, only Dak Prescott had more drops charged, to his receivers than Brady. And Brady was still one of 14 QBs to have a QB rating over 100 on passes thrown 20-plus yards downfield. It's not like a Peyton Manning 2015 scenario where, he just can't throw the ball downfield anymore. I guess my bigger concern is it's not as fantasy friendly of a situation as I think everyone's making it out to be. I understand what Jameis did last year, and just so many pass attempts in an offense with a coach whose entire moniker in life has been spent around the idea of no risk it, no biscuit. Unfortunately, everyone, Bruce Arians has changed his ways with that idea. He's already, saying that now with Brady under center, his new, life meaning is you can't go broke taking a profit, which, hey, it's worked obviously amazing for Brady and the Patriots over the years. I think it makes sense for Arians to tailor his offense around his quarterback, particularly, when you look at the kind of issues he's had every single time a new quarterback comes in to try to run this scheme. I mean, PFF keeps track of turnover-worthy plays, when a QB throws the ball straight into a linebacker's chest and he drops it. It's not an interception, but that would still count as a turnover-worthy plays. And the only 3 QBs to register at least 40 turnover-worthy plays in a single season since 2006 have been Jameis in 2019, Carson Palmer in 2013, and Andrew Luck in 2012, all quarterbacks in their first season with Bruce Arians. So I'm not saying Brady's going to have anywhere near 40 turnover-worthy plays next season, but I think he's not going to have the same fantasy upside as we saw with those other guys. He's got the weapons for it, but I would just keep your expectations in check for this offense in general. As we'll kind of continue to discuss, a lot of these guys are already priced very close to their fantasy ceiling. On the backfield, which was a complete mess last season. Literally 3-down committee between Ronald Jones, Peyton Barber, and Dari Ogunbowale. Sorry, Dari, for messing up your name there. But now we've added a 4th member to the show, LeSean McCoy. Peyton Barber is now one of 20 dudes trying to play running back in Washington, and they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn in the 3rd round. So things started off really hot for Rojo this offseason. I mean, Tom Brady called him Ron. Seemed like a big positive. He's one of, he kind of with the James Conner, Austin Eckler offseason warrior, season where these guys are showing up really jacked. Apparently, the latest word on Twitter is that Ronald Jones' calves just looked fantastic upon reporting to training camp. I like Rojo, but that argument usually only applied to conversations that also included Barber. I just think it's still a situation where he couldn't pull away from Dari last year for pass down work. He got yanked off the field almost immediately upon blowing a pass blocking assignment when they did want to give him the ball. He had a bunch of good plays, and I mean, he truly did. Like, he's not awful like we thought he might be after his rookie season. And Rojo, truly, he has some ability to run the ball. He should be the favorite to lead this backfield in touches. But, when they bring in LeSean McCoy and they draft Keyshawn Vaughn in the top 3 rounds, and Arians talks about wanting that back that can be, he said at the combine, he wants, a true 3-down guy, a Marshall Faulk, an Edgerrin James, someone who doesn't have to take off the field. I don't think he has that with any of these backs. I think the most likely scenario is we continue to see a 3, even a 4-back committee. This is what they did last year. Maybe Dari can be Brady's new look James White, but I would honestly be surprised if any of these running backs are among fantasy's top 30 most productive guys at the end of the season. And do not underestimate this LeSean McCoy signing. I'm not saying Shady's going to go out there and do his thing, but he wasn't exactly completely washed last season. I know he was a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl, but we did see some vintage Shady, especially in September and October before, he started to get some fumbling issues and before Damian Williams got really healthy again. So playing under Bruce Arians, who, we saw him enable David Johnson to those heights, but what some people forget is it took injuries to both Andre Ellington and just an old man version of Chris Johnson for David Johnson to even get that chance to ball out as a rookie. So, would not be the craziest thing Bruce Arians has done in terms of just running back pecking order for him to kind of shoot McCoy up towards the top of that depth chart. Now on to the wide receivers. We're talking about 2 of the top 10, maybe most talented receivers in the league here, and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Both of them last year were fantasy wide receiver 1s, and I get Godwin's case as the clear-cut number 1 fantasy option this year. I have him above Evans, and it's easy. He's a slot receiver in this offense. Brady just fed Julian Edelman 153 targets. We're not expecting Brady to be thrown downfield quite as much as Jameis, which would seemingly hurt someone like Evans. I get it, and I do kind of side with that. I would just keep in mind, I think we kind of overrate the slot work in general, especially for someone like Chris Godwin, where this guy can ball it anywhere over the field. This was a point that I talked with, Yahoo's Matt Harmon about on the wide receiver pod from a few weeks ago, where it's nice to get in the slot, but when we have a talent as truly good as Chris Godwin, just get him on the field. The dude's going to be fine. I think having Gronk, having Howard, we're talking about a potential 2 tight end base offense almost. It just seems unlikely we see too many 3 wide receiver sets. They more or less ignored the number 3 wide receiver position. It's going to be Justin Watson, maybe Tyler Johnson. I just think Godwin's slot rate is going to get cut down a little bit, and that's okay because he is still so good. I still think he'll be that guy in the more underneath intermediate areas of the field, reaping the benefits from Brady. We will see what happens, but Evans, he's not going away quietly either. Evans joins Randy Moss, only players in NFL history with at least 1,000 receiving yards in each of their first 6 seasons. It'd be surprising if Brady's the reason why that streak breaks for sure, but, looking at these wide receivers, the whole offseason, both of them have been in the top 12 ADP at the position. It's tough to enable 2 top 12 fantasy wide receivers. Now, we see an average of 4.3 teams that have per year 2 top 24 wide receivers in the same offense. I think the Buccaneers can certainly qualify for that, but 2 guys in the top 12, that's just asking a lot. I do have Godwin ranked inside the top 12. Evans is a little bit lower down the list for me. Nothing to do with the talent. I just think this passing game will not be quite as fantasy friendly as it was last year. And now we got the tight ends. And what a tight end room we have. We've had 37 tight ends with at least 100 targets since 2017. Number 1 yards per target is O.J. Howard at 10.4. Number 2 is Gronk at 10. I know last year wasn't great for Howard. It was awful for Howard, actually, as someone that pounded the drum to draft him, as someone that reached on Howard in many, many leagues. It was incredibly disappointing. And what I learned from that was, hey, when we have an offense with 3 high-end fantasy guys, you better be sure that, they're going to be able to enable all 3, because it's pretty hard to get 2 wide receiver 1s and a tight end 1 on the same team in the same year. And unfortunately, Howard was the one to miss out on that. Now we're kind of seeing Gronk creeping up too. And his ADP isn't at that tight end 4, tight end 5 spot that Howard's was, but Gronk is being treated as a tight end 1. And I get it. We're talking about the arguably, in my mind, the greatest tight end ever. He's got averaging 68 receiving yards per game. That's the highest mark ever at the position. Maybe a year off was all he needed to regain his athleticism. 2018 was not pretty for him, but this dude was still, taking over the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl, at least for a drive or 2 here and there. It wasn't like he was just incapable of catching the rock anymore. Certainly could see a scenario where he's, really utilized in the red zone. Is he a better blocker than a receiver at this point? Potentially, but I just find it hard to believe that, Gronk would come out of retirement, go down to Tampa to play with Brady, and not have some assurances of usage as a receiver. So I'm more okay looking at Gronk in fantasy drafts this year, closer to that tight end one borderline, than, if he was creeping up in that 5-6 spot like Howard was last year. So interesting things. I mean, one quick point on that. I had an article looking at the jump years for each position in fantasy football, just in terms of where are the top 12 PPR performers coming from in terms of years of experience in the league. And at running back and wide receiver, it's exactly like what you'd expect. Second and third year, particularly wide receivers, we see up to their 6 years still putting up a lot of wide receiver one seasons. But it's a young man's game at those positions. Quarterback and tight end, not so much. I mean, 38% of QB1 since 2010 have had double-digit years of NFL experience, when they have racked up these seasons. 20% of tight ends, that also holds true, and that is the highest mark at any of these years. Now, I understand outliers like Brady, like Gronk, your Aaron Rodgers of the world, these just future Hall of Famers are probably skewing these stats a little bit. But hey, we are talking about two future Hall of Famers, two GOATs in Brady and Gronk. So while running back and wide receiver, definitely a young man's game, don't be afraid to go to some of these veterans at quarterback and tight end because they are still very capable of putting up points there. So on to the ranks. I have Brady as my QB 11. He's going a little bit higher, usually ADP. I'm kind of happy to let someone else draft him at this point. I have Matthew Stafford, one spot ahead, Joe Burrow, one spot behind. It wouldn't be the craziest thing ever if Brady leads the NFL in passing this season like Jameis did last year. I just think that we're not going to see the same sort of fantasy-friendly downfield shots. Could be more of a ball control offense than we are giving it credit for. I have Ronald Jones as my RB 34, one spot behind Tevin Coleman, one spot ahead of Sony Michel. He's a prime zero RB candidate. I mean, as the likely and projected touch leader in what should be an above average offense at a minimum. I get the Rojo hype just because, again, he's so cheap. It's not like you're going to kill your team by using a 7th or 8th round pick on Ronald Jones. I have Keyshawn Vaughn down the list a little bit. RB 41, one spot behind Chase Edmonds, one spot ahead of Phillip Lindsay. Honestly, might even bump him down a little bit more with the influx of Shady. I'm not really, drafting Dari anywhere. It's just he's not going to get rush attempts. And as for Shady, man, maybe like a real late round pick on the guy can't hurt. But again, just more of a situation where I think Shady has the potential to come in, steal snaps and maybe a few touches. Way less potential to come in and actually take over the whole backfield. At wide receiver, I have Chris Godwin at wide receiver 10, one spot behind A.J. Brown, one spot ahead of Robert Woods. Just a great player that should still have plenty of opportunity. I just don't think the top 5, is all that realistic for him to get into again. But hey, guy did it once, more than capable of achieving so again with enough targets. Mike Evans, wide receiver 18, one spot behind Amari Cooper, one spot ahead of DJ Chark. And again, like Evans is a top 10 wide receiver in talent. This, fantasy football rankings are not about identifying talent. It's about trying to identify production. And I just think that this offense is not going to enable 2 wide receiver ones again, which is why, I'm taking the stance that Godwin greater than Evans, similar to what I, did with the Rams and with having Robert Woods well ahead of Cooper Kupp. Some of these offenses, it's hard to do. Gotta adjust accordingly. Tight end, I have Gronk as my tight end 7. And this has led to me getting him in a good amount of drafts because he's usually going more around the tight end one borderline. I have Tyler Higbee one spot ahead of Gronk, Hunter Henry one spot below. We just have questions for all these tight ends after the top 3, and that's why, I'm not going to reach on your Evan Ingrams, your Higbees, or your Gronks of the world, but I'm happy if they're going to fall to me at a more appropriate spot in the draft. So go on to the win total, which is set at 9.5. You got the Saints projected to win the NFC South still. Panthers are in the dumps. There's a real scenario where Tampa Bay, gets going and they do fulfill these expectations. I mean, Falcons, 7.5 win total. They're not looking all that great either. I do kind of wonder if the Indianapolis Colts are the team that everyone wants Tampa Bay to be, but that defense was sneaky solid last year. I mean, you saw Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, and really as the season went on, they started to form an actual nice 1-2 combo in the secondary because the run defense was there all season and that pass rush, oh my goodness, was definitely there. So if those young corners can continue to grow up a little bit, I think this team can be very, very good in real life. Fantasy prospects, as I've explained, I'm a little bit lower on now that they're all being priced at their ceilings instead of the floor, but I will take the over on Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 9.5 wins. So thank you everyone for listening. This has been the 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers PFF Fantasy Football Team Preview. I'm Ian Hartitz. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.